So the other day, I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, and I was looking at my phone. And to be honest, I'd just seen someone go into the coffee shop, and I recognized them as someone that I had needed to talk to. You ever seen somebody that you just, like, I meant to talk to them, we really need to have a conversation, one of those conversations that you've been probably putting off too long. And so as I was sitting there, I'm wrestling with my phone, and I'm like checking through email like 14 times. I'm going through the weather app. I'm basically doing anything that I can to avoid going inside. You ever been there? And it's because I think as I was processing, what was I doing? I was waiting for the right moment. Like, we haven't had a conversation. We need to be talking. We should talk. And I'm waiting. Maybe they're going to come out and see me and then say, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you. Or they were going to randomly send me a text message. I think we all know what we're doing, right? Maybe you were in the grocery cart and you're kind of pushing your cart down the aisle and you see that person, that particular person coming, and then all of a sudden you become really fascinated by the nutrition facts on a cereal box. Right? Or you're at your kid's school event, you see that other parent that you had a disagreement with, and all of a sudden you're just really fascinated with your phone. Like, we can get caught up in seeing people and thinking, I can't really interact with them, you know? I've watched, I'm an observer of people, I've watched people do this, and they're out in a public event, and you could see that there's somebody definitely that they recognize, and all of a sudden they just become fascinated with all kinds of weird stuff. The weirdest, they look like they were fascinated with lint on their shirt or something. I'm like, what are they doing? And they're avoiding that person. I felt like going to the other person going, hey, they're avoiding you. But we're all professionals at this, right? We got our moves down. You ever been in a meeting or somebody walks in or something, you need to have a conversation, and all of a sudden you fake a phone call so that you can leave the room, or, whatever it takes. But here's what's really going on in all these moments. It's not that we're busy. It's not that it's bad timing. It's not even really that it's awkward. As I've thought about it, it's about something that is deeper than that, and it's a little more scary than that. We all have what I would call emotional IOUs. And when we see people, we begin to think, well, they owe me, right? They should be the one to reach out because they are the ones that said those words. They are the one that hurt me. They're the one who stopped calling. They're the one who needs to apologize. They're the older sibling. They're the boss. They're the leader. They're the parent. So therefore, they should take the first move. And we convince ourselves we're just waiting for the right moment. But really, we're just waiting for them to make the first move. Because making the first move kind of feels like you lost, right? Like you gave in. Like, I'm going to do this, and I admit maybe that I'm wrong, or I'm admitting at least that they potentially could be right. But what if they're sitting in their car right now? What if they're staring at their phone thinking the exact same thing about you? What if the relationship could be restored? What if that friendship could be rekindled, or that family could be reunited? They're just waiting on someone, anyone, to make the first move. And here's the question that keeps bothering me. What if that perfect moment we're waiting for isn't coming? What if it isn't coming because we're the ones supposed to create it? That bothers me. Like, what if we're the ones that are supposed to step in? What if we're the ones to take the first step? Well, 2,000 years ago, in a town called Jericho, there was a man who understood this tension perfectly. He was stuck in what was kind of a weird waiting zone for him, where when you hear his story and understand his background, nobody was going to make a first move towards him. His story, though, shows us something revolutionary about making the first move. So, if you got a Bible, you can open it to Luke chapter 19. If you don't have a Bible, open up an app. And if you don't know what app we're talking about, you can go to your app store, the Google App Store or the Apple app, and download the YouVersion Bible app. Do that. Go to Luke chapter 19. I want you to read the words. If you're new, I'm going to put them on the screen, but I'd love for you to read along with us. But before we dive into Luke chapter 19, and while you're downloading that app, here's a little context. And we're going to understand in this context why this man, his name is Zacchaeus, was so desperate to see Jesus in the first place. By this point in Jesus' life, word has really started to get out all across that whole region in the area about the kinds of things that Jesus was doing. And these weren't just stories of another religious teacher. These were stories that would have grabbed Zacchaeus' attention. Jesus had already been hanging out with tax collectors, which is what Zacchaeus is. But not only was he hanging out with tax collectors, he called one tax collector to come be with him, to be a disciple. His name is Levi. He'd been causing controversy everywhere because he was choosing to have meals and to have conversations and to hang out with what they called sinners, the very people religious people were not supposed to hang out with. And just a few chapters earlier, Jesus told a story about how a tax collector went home justified by God and the religious leader didn't. People were talking about how Jesus offered a different kind of life, how he offers a fresh start, a restoration. All of this would have captured Zacchaeus' attention. Zacchaeus has wealth. Probably more wealth than anybody else in Jericho, unless they were some Roman ruler. But he, at the same time, probably hasn't been invited to a dinner party in years. And every day he walks through Jericho, and every person that he locks eyes with hates him. Could you imagine? They hate him. They fear him. They pull kids aside. They don't want anyone to be close to him. And then he hears the story about this teacher is coming to town who doesn't just tolerate people like him. He transforms their life. He gives them new identities, new purposes. From someone living in isolation, even isolation with financial success, from someone living in isolation, this is magnetic. I got to get near this guy. So when Jesus comes to Jericho, it's not a casual curiosity for Zacchaeus. This is his one shot. Does make me think of the musical Hamilton. But one shot. He's not going to waste his one shot. You can go listen. One shot at something that money can't buy. Acceptance, belonging, transformation. So with all of that in mind, Luke begins the story in chapter 19 this way. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. Now, Luke gives us two very important details. The one is, he's not just a tax collector, he's the chief tax collector. If the people hated tax collectors, how much do you think they hate the person who's in charge of all of the tax collectors? He's the chief tax collector. And then he puts in this other little detail. He was very rich. Again, these aren't random facts that Luke is putting in here. This is crucial to understand his social position. Because in that culture, being wealthy normally would mean you were very popular. You had a lot of influence. But for Zacchaeus, he was very wealthy, but everybody hated him. So he lives in a paradox. He's got status, but he's got stigma. He's powerful, but he's also isolated. There are walls between him and everyone else. Probably sounds familiar, right? Sometimes our position, our past, our choices, they can create these invisible barriers. And they put us in this strange place where I don't understand why we are disconnected anymore. It's the person, maybe you've experienced this, you've moved up at work and you've gotten advanced, and then all of a sudden all your work buddies that you used to hang out with, they don't talk to you anymore. And you're like, well, the only thing that changed was I got promoted. And there's just this wall that is there. It's the kid who went through a rough patch in his sophomore year at high school. Maybe you made some choices that you're not proud of. And even though you've changed, people still see you as that person back there. Maybe you moved away for college and you built this whole new life and a new friend group, and it's kind of put you at odds with all of your high school hometown crew. Or maybe you're that friend and you got serious about your faith and you started making different choices, and now your friends are starting to isolate because they think you're judging them, and you're not judging them. You're just trying to figure out what this new life means for you. Or maybe you're a parent and you've spent your whole career working to provide for your family all the things that they would need. Great house, great this, be able to pay for this. And the whole time what you didn't realize is now the relationship has separated because somehow there's a wall. You didn't do all the other things maybe that you should have done. Zacchaeus feels it. He's in this tension. His position was real, but the barriers were just as real. Sometimes we get so used to those barriers, we can start using those things as excuses. Well, I can't reach out because they'll think I'm just showing off. Or I can't be vulnerable because I got to maintain my image. But what if those barriers, those very things we think are keeping us from connecting, are actually the walls we have built to protect ourselves? And those things need to come down. What if we're using our position, our past, our success, or our labels as a convenient way of avoiding what Zacchaeus is about to actually do? So Luke tells us this. Zacchaeus is here. He's a tax collector. He's very rich. Verse 3. He tried to get a look at Jesus. And I personally love this next phrase, but he was too short. It's okay to see over the crowd. I grew up in Sunday school where we sang a little song. Maybe you remember it. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. And a wee little man was he. I see some heads nodding. I never knew I was going to grow up to be Zacchaeus. So it says he tries to get a look. And he can't see Jesus. So now he's got a choice. What's he going to do about it? He could do what a lot of us do. Well, I tried, and I'm just going to stay here in my comfort zone because it didn't work out. He can maintain his dignity. He can sit in his car and just keep scrolling. Or, verse 4. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass by that way. You may not be catching all of the things here that Luke is saying, but a grown man, a wealthy man, a powerful tax collector runs. No one of any status or power or money, you don't run anywhere. Not only did he run, he climbs a tree like a third grader. Probably in one of his best outfits. I'm sure that's what he is wearing at the time. So this isn't about trying to see Jesus. It's not just about that. It's about Zacchaeus deciding that relationship is worth risking dignity for. Somewhere in his head that clicked. I want to see this guy. I want to get to know this guy. And it was worth risking his dignity. Imagine the whispers. The crowd, as he's climbing up that tree, I'm sure they are laughing. Look at the big shot now, climbing up a little tree. Hey, little man, how you doing up there? They're watching him just make a fool of himself. And I think we've had moments like this where we know what we need to do in order to fix a relationship. I get people in my office all the time talking about relationships, and we'll have conversations, and a lot of the time they're not there because they don't know what to do. They're just afraid to do it. There's many reasons why generally we know what to do, but it feels awkward. It feels below our position. Maybe it's that person in your friend group who knows they need to address the drama that's going on in the text chat, but doesn't want to be the one to bring it up. Or there's that person who's been dating somebody for 2 months and they're not really feeling it, but they're kind of afraid to bring it up because, the timing never seems right. Or that older sibling who needs to reach out to one of their younger siblings because it's been years since they've had any contact. Or it could be the spouse who needs to say, I was wrong. And they need to be the first one to say it, even though you both say things you regret. Or it's that ex who needs to apologize for how things ended, even though pride says they hurt me too. We know what we need to do. It's just awkward sometimes. But here's what Zacchaeus knew. Sometimes the first move looks like humility. Sometimes it means being willing to look a little ridiculous in the eyes of the people that are around us because something more important is at stake. We're all carrying around relationship debts. We all have things where we think, I shouldn't have to be the first one to make the first move. I shouldn't have to be the first one to send the first text. I shouldn't be the one to extend the first invitation or offer the first apology. I get it. But Zacchaeus is showing us something powerful. The first move isn't about who should or shouldn't. The first move isn't about right, isn't about wrong. It's about willing to be humble. Are you willing to be humble? Humility is one of the characteristics that God places in us. Pay attention to what happens next. Because Zacchaeus isn't the only one to make a first move. Verse 5, Luke tells us when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name, which is a whole, did he know him because he was infamous in the area? Does he just know him because he's Jesus? But he calls him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Don't just read past that. Because something incredible happens right here. Jesus himself makes the first move towards Zacchaeus. He notices him, and he doesn't wait for an invite. He invites himself over to his house. This is something a religious leader would never do. Invite yourself over to the house of the chief tax collector? How dare you? Think of the most repulsive thing that you could think of in our culture, and then encountering someone who is engaged in that activity and then saying, hey, I just need to come over and hang out and have dinner at your house. This just wasn't done. Notice that Jesus doesn't wait for an invitation. He doesn't wait for Zacchaeus to prove that he's worthy. He doesn't even wait for Zacchaeus to speak first. You see, the most powerful first move is the one made towards us. That is the most powerful move. And while Zacchaeus is trying to see Jesus, Jesus has already seen Zacchaeus. Jesus was making himself available. He was moving into his world. And this is where the story can get deeply personal for every one of us. Because I find myself in this story, and I bet you can find yourself in Zacchaeus' story. We're all trying to see Jesus from a safe distance. We're all calculating the risks. We're all wondering if we should make the first move. I remember in my life, and I encounter people all the time, that this is how they think. They think you need to clean up your act before God will want anything to do with you. You think you need to fix all your problems before you can come back to a church. You think you need to have all the answers before you can step into faith. Or you think you need to earn your way back into God's good graces. None of that is true. Because the beautiful truth, the most powerful thing is the move made towards us, and Jesus has already made the first move. He's already moved towards you. You don't need to do anything. Verse 6. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. Notice the words here, quickly. Man, he's excited. He is full of joy, right? This is an amazing moment for Zacchaeus because Jesus makes this move and he knows he doesn't deserve it. So what's his response? Boy, I'm acting quickly. It changed everything. The walls came down. I love that Luke puts this statement in too, but the people were displeased. So these are all the other people around. They're not happy with Jesus. He's gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. There's always going to be people like that in your life. But Jesus is not interested at all in their grumbling. I mean, he doesn't even address it. He doesn't even deal with it because he knew something that they didn't. This move that he's making, this event that he is heading into, it creates a space for transformation. By him making that first move, transformation is possible. There's always going to be people who don't understand the power of making the first move. There is always going to be people who think you should wait longer, that you should prove yourself more, you should suffer a little more consequences. Because people have turned relationship into a transaction. But Jesus says, no, just make the move. Because when you make the first move, it begins to open the door and the possibility for transformation. Verse 8. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor. Something's happening. But then he goes on. And if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. This is huge. And the thing I want to point out here is Jesus didn't ask for this. Jesus didn't make him do this. Nobody forced him to do this. Nobody demanded it. There wasn't a prerequisite. This wasn't a requirement. But when Jesus moved towards Zacchaeus, it created a space for Zacchaeus to be transformed and make a move of his own. He's moving towards these people. This is where we see the ultimate power of making a first move. It's not about initiating contact. It's about initiating change. It's about creating the space where transformation becomes possible. And Jesus responds to this. Jesus responds, salvation has come to this home today. Love that statement. To everybody that was outside bickering and murmuring, why are you hanging out? Salvation has come to this house. For this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. You got to love it. For the Son of Man, and you've probably heard this verse, this is the context that it's in. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. Zacchaeus was lost. He had everything, but he was lost. Ever been there? Just lost. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. Things don't feel right. Jesus says, that's my job. I come to seek and to save. Save people out of their lostness. The ultimate first move. You see, Jesus didn't just come to Jericho that day. He made a first move for all of humanity. He crossed multiple lines to save. Well, who? Me and you. And here's what I keep coming back to. That day I was sitting in my car outside the coffee shop. I had this realization. There is never going to be a perfect moment. There's just this moment right now. And so maybe for you, there are some people, Jesus has made a first move for you, and now you feel called to make a first move towards someone else. Let me give you really practical what that first move looks like, because I've seen it work in hundreds of relationships. Family rifts to workplace. I've seen decade-long silences. Here's the first thing. If you want to do and make a move, identify one relationship that's stuck. Identify a relationship that's stuck. You probably already know the one, so here's what I want you to do. Pull your phone out. If you got, no, go ahead, pull your phone out. Pull your phone out. It's difficult. I know that's weird. Like in church, we tell you to put your phone. No, pull your phone out. I want you to open your Notes app. Open your Notes app. You already know the answer to this. Who is it? Type it in your phone. Shield it if you have to. If it's the person next to you. You know the one. It's the relationship where you're both waiting on the other person to reach out first. Maybe it's a sibling you haven't talked to since that family estate was settled and everything went sideways, or it's the former best friend that you used to have and it's just slowly drifted away. Maybe it's a coworker that you had some heated disagreement with, or maybe it's a neighbor who misunderstood something you said. You know who the one is. Identify the one. Put them in your Notes app. We're going to come back to this. Decide on one concrete action. Not a whole reconciliation plan. You don't need to know all that yet. Just one move. One thing that you can do to move forward. I'm going to give you some very specific, I'm going to help you as much as I can. Here's what you could do. If you got a family relationship, you can get on the phone, make a call, take a picture of this if you need help. And just say, hey, I've been thinking about you a lot today. Could we grab coffee next week? No agenda. I just miss you. That's a move. You can do that. You could text that like right now. It's a friendship that's drifted away. Hey, I know it's been a while. That's partly on me. Would you be open to catching up? I'd love to hear how you're doing. You can do that. Maybe it's a work relationship. Hey, I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I realize there's some things that I could have handled better. Can we talk? You can do that. Maybe it's a friend that you had a fight with. Hey, I know things got weird after what happened in class or work or whatever you want. Could we talk about it at lunch tomorrow? Guys, you can do this. That is concrete. You can make that first move. You can do it. So think of the one, come up with a concrete first step, and then the third thing, set a deadline. Not next week, not when it feels right. Set a deadline. Today, tomorrow. Here's what I've learned. The longer we wait, the harder it gets. So now you got that name in your phone. Here's what I want you to do. Pull out your calendar or your reminders. Well, this is hard. And don't use your voice to text. Nobody wants to hear your reminder. That'd be weird. Set yourself a reminder and make it specific. Text Sarah at 10 a.m. Call mom after dinner. When's it going to be? When are you going to do it? Who is it? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? You make the first move. Jesus made the first move for you. You can do it. Let me tell you why I'm so passionate about that. That conversation I was avoiding is with someone that I had a falling out with a long time ago, and something to look back at. Seems a little small now, but over time, man, it just grew to be huge. I mean, pride got involved, and then time started passing by. You know what I mean? 6 months turns into a year turns into 2 years, 2 years turns into 4. But when I finally walked into the coffee shop, the conversation wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be, not as hard as I'd built it up in my head. Why? Because they were waiting on me to make a first move too. And that one awkward conversation led to things that I never thought was possible. And I'm not the only one. Just as I was writing this, reflecting, just in this last year, I have witnessed a father and son who haven't spoken in 15 years reconcile just because one texted the other and said, I miss you. 15 years. I've seen two former business partners rebuild their friendship after a bitter falling out because one texted the other and said, hey, can we go get coffee? I've seen neighbors turn a 3-year-old Cold War into a regular dinner invitation. This is why I have hope, because I've seen it happen in my life, and I've seen it happen in y'all's life over and over and over. One move, one conversation, one moment of courage. That's all it takes to start. And here's why it matters. We are living in a world of unprecedented disconnection. We're all carrying around relational wounds, missed connections, moments that we wish we could redo. And here's what's at stake when it comes to relationship. If every relationship that stays broken, it doesn't just hurt you. It hurts everyone around you. It hurts and it shapes. For those of us who have children, our wounded relationships, they shape how our kids view relationships. Your workplace tension, that affects everybody's productivity. And every time someone makes the first move, it doesn't just heal one relationship. It has a cascading effect to all the other relationships around it. It shows other people what's possible. It gives people permission to be brave. It demonstrates that pride and fear, they don't have the final word. This is why Jesus' interaction with Zacchaeus, it wasn't just about having dinner or a lunch at another tax collector's house. It showed an entire community what was possible. Someone just made the first move. And 2,000 years later, Jesus is still making the first move towards us, still showing up, uninvited, still saying, hey, I got to come to your house today. And every time we make a first move towards someone else, we get to participate in that story of redemption over and over and over again. You have relationships right now that could change everything, not just for you, but for your family, for your school, for your workplace. Relationships, once restored, that could have a cascading healing effect on everyone around you. The first move is waiting. The time is now, and you know exactly who you need to reach out. Don't wait for someday. Don't wait for them. Don't wait for perfect. The next chapter of your story and theirs is just one move away. Let's all pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for showing us what it looks like to make the first move. When I think about how you came for us, how you still come for us, not wanting us to clean up our act or to figure everything out, it humbles me. And now here we are, faces, names heavy on our heart, knowing that we need to do something, and everything in this world is holding us back. Some of us, we've got justification. We have been hurt so deeply. Some of us have rehearsed these conversations in our head thousands upon thousands of times. Maybe we have spent years building walls, and those walls feel a whole lot safer than bridges. But here we are right now, and we're going to do something brave together. So right where you're at, right in this time of reflection, in the presence of God and the Holy Spirit, I want you to pull your phone right back out. Don't look around, look down. Pull your phone out. Pull that person up. In the Messages app, just pull their name up. I'm sure you already have it. And I'm sure your hands are shaking. Type something in there. Hey, I've been thinking of you. Can we talk? That simple. I'll give you a moment. God, I pray you give us courage for this. Some of us, man, this is scary. Some of us, we're looking down at that messaging app, or we're looking at a calendar to put an appointment, and our heart is just racing. Be with us in that, God. God, we know who it is. We know the conversation we've been avoiding. Help us be brave, God. And Jesus, I just personally thank you. I know you understand how hard this is. You understand the cost. You know our fears of what might happen when we press send, when we show up for coffee, when we lay our pride down. I thank you don't rush us, you don't shame us, but I also thank you don't let us off the hook either. And today, because of our examples, we're choosing to make the first move. Jesus, you know it's not because we're ready. It's not because we're sure. But it's because somebody had to go first. And you went first for me. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.